Our guest author this morning is a published performance poet and African scholar. Katleho Kano Shoro has now put together some of her favorite poems and produced a poetry collection book that she titled Serurubele Poems. She has spread her footprint beyond Mzansi shores and has showcased her talent to various audiences in countries such as Swaziland, London, to mention just a few. And she joins me now from our Sipon studios to tell us more about her latest offering. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you are an established poet. Talk to us about your journey as a poet. How did it come about?
Good morning. Okay, it started a while back when I was like in school. And it was just like random writing. And then in high school, we had like an annual poetry thing. And I used to write and perform there because it was just annual. You needed to pick that. And then I carried on through university as well when I was doing poetry, just something on the side. And then about 3 years ago, it was the decision that actually this is something that I need to take a lot more seriously, a lot more professionally, and it felt like it was time. So that's the journey.
So what prompted you and inspired you to put together this book, Serurubele Poems?
Actually, it was a couple of years ago. One of my professors who was supervising a thesis that I was doing on, my honors thesis that I was doing on performance poetry, that he just knew that I was writing poetry and asked if it's something that I'd be interested in. So it's been percolating for a little bit.
So what is it that you reflect highly on these poems? So what is it that you express yourself on?
There are a couple of things. For me, my foundation is that artists are intellectuals. And also just looking at the different kinds of intellectuals that we have that are not necessarily part of the academic space. So exploring that, like what does it mean for your grandmother to be one of the intellectuals in your life? What does it mean to think of someone that knows a lot about herbs or the spaces around us, the natural spaces around us as an intellectual? So African intellectualism and exploring that, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of poetry around masculinity from my perspective, right? So relationship with my father, the idea of having a present father in a moment where a lot of black children are growing up without a father. Like, what does that mean? There's a bit of history reflection. There's a little bit of Thomas Sankara in there. There's a response poem to Oswald Mtshali as well. His poem of the pigeons in Oppenheimer Park. And there's mourning and Sesotho Lesotho that's in there.
You have showcased your talent at the various literary festivals across the country, and I do understand that you've spread your wings across the shores, Swaziland, amongst other countries. So what does that tell you about where you are in your career?
For me, it means that there is resonance. So this idea that you first need to be international and appeal to a more international space in order to be a local, for me, then it becomes debunked. You have to come from a specifically personal, local space. And for that, if the work resonates, then it will find its feet in different spaces. And it just means that I'm able to have conversations with other people and we're able to hear each other. And poetry is allowing that to happen, but also their connections as Batu, those connections that are able to happen with this, yeah.
You've just articulated the underlying message that's encapsulated in this book. So after reading this book, what is it that you want me to take away from it?
I want you to look at the spaces in your life and figure out what's your value? What are other people's values, right? And just rethinking the world and rethinking, Shapo, there are certain people that are meant to look like they've got different, or that are valued more than others. But what does a world look like when we see each other for who the person is and are able to value different things about ourselves and each other? And also just looking through your languages, what impact does your language have on you? And the relationships that you have, like what are the complications, and also this idea that as Africans we are complex in the good, in the bad, in the weird, in the strange, in the creative. We are complex. So for me, I would like you to come out wanting to learn more about that, but also reflecting on our complexities as people.
Indeed, and it must be quite a daunting task speaking to complex communities, as you say it now. Multitudes of young and aspiring poets are watching right now. So how would you advise them?
Be patient. So take the time out to learn as much as possible. Learn about performance, learn about other people, learn about poetry, because I find that a lot of people don't actually make the decision to learn about poetry. It's that thing of, oh, poetry is just expression, whereas poetry is a craft. There's tradition that comes with it. And I'm not talking just in a traditional English kind of way of writing poetry, but I'm talking about le rona ha re bua ka dithoko. They are different traditions that come with that I'm still learning. So it's a long process. Don't rush to be famous, because also fame can be a myth. Figure out what it is that you're doing. Do it with integrity and put the effort into it. And then little by little, things will come together in the ways that they're supposed to for you.
Indeed, Katleho, and I take your point that faith can be a myth. Now, where are we in South Africa in terms of poetry? Do people embrace this? Do people have a deeper understanding of what poetry is about and what it seeks to do in our communities?
So the idea of people, right? So they are publics. They're different kinds of publics. So it's not just like, oh, the whole of South Africa will know, right? But we're in this beautiful moment where poetry is growing and people are trying to engage with it in very different ways. So in the one sense, there are people that are talking protest, people that are talking self-definition, self-care, mental illness. People are looking to poetry in ways like that, just to find words and to unpack what's going on with them, but also with people around them. But also then you find that because of the moment, the very volatile but emotional moment that we're in, you're also finding that older people, older activists as well, there's something about poetry that's pulling them in, right? And then you have younger kids who are not necessarily into poetry when it's in the classroom, but things like hip-hop, things like writing for themselves and grouping themselves poetically, that is starting to happen. So there are these different pockets of publics that are popping up, and I'm just wondering how they're going to come together as we as poets also look towards building a more coherent or kind of industry. Like it's interesting. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, interesting times indeed, Katleho, and I agree with you. There's that X factor that keeps on drawing you to poetry. That is why so many hip-hop gurus use poetry for their craft. But then thank you so much for chatting to us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, that's published performance poet and African scholar Katleho Kano Shoro speaking to us about the latest poetry collection book that she titled Serurubele Poems. All right.